Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're tracking a situation that is setting up to severely disrupt global commodities, and that's the rapidly warming Pacific Ocean. Look, we are essentially watching a slow-moving, heavily telegraphed climate event on a direct collision course with a highly sensitive global agricultural market. And the kicker? The real shockwaves from this, they won't actually peak until next year.
So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The 2026 El Niño alert. 2. Tracking the warming Pacific. 3. Global agricultural domino effects. 4. High-risk commodities. 5. The delayed supply shock. And finally, 6. Market forecasts for 2027. We're going to follow this domino effect from the raw meteorological data right through to the delayed agricultural realities that are going to hit the markets in 2027. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The 2026 El Niño alert, a climate reality. Let's start with the official meteorological status from NOAA as of July 2026.
97%. According to the Climate Prediction Center, there is a staggering 97% chance that this El Niño will persist right through the early spring of 2027. So, we're way past the point of speculation here. El Niño is actively present. And those atmospheric circulation anomalies over the equatorial Pacific, they're already locked in.
And we need to be clear, this isn't just some slight warming event. NOAA explicitly states it will strengthen through the end of the year. Climate models broadly agree the temperature signal is going to climb deep into strong territory by the fourth quarter. Actually, forecasts are pushing toward a 1.8 degrees Celsius anomaly. That is a massive oceanic heat engine spinning up, peaking right at the end of the calendar year.
Section 2. Tracking the warming Pacific, the oceanic data.
To really grasp what this means for global weather, we have to look directly at the sea surface temperatures in the Pacific. Just look at the dramatic anomalies here. You've got this massive buildup of above-average heat emerging across the east central and eastern equatorial Pacific, and this has been building since mid-April 2026. Those deep reds and oranges, they show exactly how rapidly this heat is accumulating, effectively changing the heat content of the entire basin.
Breaking this down into specific monitoring zones is where it gets really fascinating. If you look at the critical Niño 3.4 region, it's hitting 1.4 degrees Celsius above average, while the Niño 3 region is already up to 1.6 degrees. This data pinpoints exactly where the ocean is actively intensifying, and that intensity is what creates the atmospheric feedback loop that ends up altering our global weather.
Section 3. Global agricultural domino effects, from ocean to farm.
So we have a rapidly warming ocean. But how does that ocean heat reliably translate to atmospheric shifts across our major global farming regions? Well, it triggers a massive domino effect. Historically, this specific heat signature brings severe dry weather to Southeast Asia and Australia. At the same time, it fundamentally alters rainfall patterns in Brazil and the Americas. It's basically an entire global reshuffling of where the rain falls, and maybe more importantly, where it stops falling.
Section 4. High-risk commodities, ranking the market threat.
Here's the key thing to remember. Not all crops respond the same way to this shift. Let's look at the extremes. Cocoa faces the absolute highest risk. Literally every strong El Niño in the past 55 years has reduced global cocoa production. And with Ecuador and Indonesia so highly exposed, it's incredibly vulnerable right now. Coffee, on the other hand, it's kind of the outlier. It remains relatively unaffected because the record Brazilian crop that's driving the current surplus has largely already been harvested. Sure, the weather might affect some future quality, but the sheer volume is already secure.
Now, when you map out other high-risk crops, you see just how incredibly concentrated some of these supply chains really are. Indonesia and Malaysia account for 90% of the global palm oil supply. That is a massive concentration of risk sitting right in the crosshairs of El Niño drying patterns. We're also seeing huge exposure for cotton and sugar, which are heavily dependent on rainfall in India and Pakistan. And speaking of India, their monsoon season is absolutely critical. It acts as a massive swing factor for global sugar supply. If they experience a severe monsoon failure, they could lose 4 to 5 million tons of production. But, and this is super interesting, they actually have a buffer built into their system. They can redirect 3 to 4 million tons away from their ethanol energy program and back into the food supply to stabilize the market. So it's this delicate balancing act that is entirely dependent on the rain.
Section 5. The delayed supply shock. The lag effect.
Okay, this brings us to what is probably the most vital mechanism to understand in this explainer, the lag. There is an inevitable 6 to 12 month gap between the climate signal and the actual harvest. While El Niño will hit its peak temperature in late 2026, the real physical damage to crop yields won't be fully realized until mid-2027. That means the maximum supply tightness in global markets, it won't actually hit until late 2027 and into 2028.
The commodity report really hit the nail on the head here. They noted that while traders in the futures markets often panic immediately when these meteorological alerts drop, the physical reality in global stockpiles is a slow-moving crisis. It builds steadily over the following year as reserves are slowly drawn down and those smaller harvests finally make their way into the silos.
Section 6. Market Forecasts for 2027. The Perfect Storm. As we forecast ahead to 2027, we can't just look at this in a vacuum. We have to consider converging variables that make this delayed weather shock incredibly dangerous. Market analysts are warning about a literal perfect storm. Right now, millions of tons of fertilizer trade are stalled due to global shipping disruptions. That means this delayed El Niño yield hit is converging on the exact same 2027 crop cycle as massive fertilizer shortages. You've got crops that will be stressed by a lack of rainfall being simultaneously stressed by a lack of nutrients.
So how do we navigate this complex landscape? Well, here are the key indicators you absolutely need to be watching. First, does the atmosphere continue to fully respond to these ocean temperatures? The ocean can be as warm as it wants, but the winds actually have to change for that domino effect to start. Second, keep a really close eye on the upcoming NOAA climate model runs. And most importantly, watch the actual daily rainfall performance of the Indian monsoon through September. That alone will essentially dictate the fate of cotton, sugar, and rice.
Which leaves us with one final provocative question to think about. We've got overlapping independent crises, a massive meteorological shift, and a disrupted fertilizer supply chain. Both of these are running on hidden, delayed 6 to 12-month timelines. So if the futures curves are only reacting to the news of today, are we truly prepared for the physical reality of what actually hits the markets next year? Keep a very close eye on those stockpiles, folks, because 2027 is shaping up to be a seriously turbulent year.